Hello, all. Good evening and welcome. I'm Mamta Rawat from the Corporate Communications team of CareEdge. I welcome you to our discussion today on solar equipment manufacturing, sunny days ahead. We sincerely appreciate your time in joining us for this webinar. We would like to welcome our esteemed guest speakers for today. Mr. Chiranjeev Saluja, Managing Director at Premier Energies. Mr. Kuldeep Jain, Managing Director at CleanMax Group. Mr. Nilesh Malani, Chief Marketing Officer at Waaree Energies. Mr. Neeraj Gupta, SVP and Head Strategy at Renew Group. This session will be moderated by Jatin Arya, Director at CareEdge Ratings. We will commence the session with the presentation by Mayuresh Karavade. Before we commence, I would like to invite Sabyasachi Madar, with over 25 years of experience in credit rating
Thank you, Mamta, for the quick introduction, and good afternoon and a very warm
and
welcome.
sectoral research such as etc.
Thank you, Mamta, for the quick introduction, and good afternoon and a very warm welcome to one and all who have joined us for today's webinar on the solar equipment manufacturing sector. Special thanks all to our distinguished panelists who have taken their valuable time out for gracing our webinar. We start with a brief presentation which would last around 15 minutes, in which we'll cover a brief overview of the RE sector, the journey of the Indian solar equipment sector so far. We also take a look at the policy support, opportunities available in the export market, price trends, and the road forward. So without much ado, let me hand over the stage to my colleague, Mayuresh, for the presentation. Over to you, Mayuresh.
Good afternoon, everyone. The topic for today's webinar is Should the solar equipment manufacturing segment expect sunny days ahead? India's solar power capacity growth to 90 gigawatt as of March 2024 was through imported Chinese modules. However, the Indian government now promotes self-sufficiency through phased backward integration across the value chain. This policy shift includes tariff and non-tariff barriers coupled with production incentives. With a goal of 500 gigawatt renewable energy capacity by 2030, domestic demand is expected to stay strong and exports to key markets promising in the near term. In today's webinar, we will try to understand the overall progress we have made in the solar equipment manufacturing segment, along with sector-specific trends, policies, and issues. The content flow in today's webinar includes the following: updates in the RE sector, capacity of module and cell manufacturing in India, regulatory landscape, exports market, pricing trends and their likely impact on solar tariffs, and CareEdge Ratings outlook on the sector. To set the context, we will take an overview of the growth in RE capacity of India, particularly solar. As shown in Exhibit 1, the total RE capacity of India stood at 155 gigawatt as of September 2024. The solar segment is the largest contributor in the RE mix, with India's solar capacity at 91 gigawatt as of September 2024, 47 gigawatt. The rising share of RE capacity has been on account of strong policy focus, superior tariff competitiveness, and strong investor interest. The solar power segment remained the key driver of capacity addition in the RE sector, with significant capacity additions over the past 7 to 8 years, which increased its share in the RE capacity mix to 59% as of September 2024, from 15% as of March 2016. As shown in Exhibit 4, India installed 18.5 gigawatt of RE capacity in FY24, which was 21% higher than the capacity added in the previous fiscal. We expect the annual RE installations to surpass 35 gigawatt over the next 2 years, primarily supported by a healthy pipeline of more than 100 gigawatt. The growth in solar capacity in the medium term will be driven by annual tendering target of 50 gigawatt RE capacity through renewable energy implementing agencies, majority of which are expected from solar. Sizable capacity additions of about 20 gigawatt will be contributed through rooftop solar, hybrid solar component, and off-grid solar over the next 2 to 3 years. This apart, solar open access capacities of 4 to 5 gigawatt are likely to be added over the next 2 to 3 years, aided by ESG commitments of corporates and improving economic viability of C&I projects. Having seen the growth prospects of the solar power capacity, we'll now dive into our topic, solar equipment manufacturing. India boasts of nearly 70 gigawatt of module capacity and nearly 8 gigawatt of cell capacity as of March 2024, as against the annual average solar capacity additions of nearly 21 gigawatt on DC basis witnessed over the last 2 years. However, high efficiency module capacity is limited to 50 gigawatt, with TOPCon constituting only about 10 gigawatt and Monoperc accounting for nearly 40 gigawatt, whereas the balanced 20 gigawatt capacity is for low efficiency modules, thereby barely sufficing the domestic module requirement. Of this 70 gigawatt, the capacity enlisted under the approved list of models and manufacturers for modules, also referred to as ALMM1, reached 60 gigawatt as of September 2024, as shown in Exhibit 6, although a large section of this capacity is in the ramp-up phase. The accelerated growth over last 12 months has been an outcome of growing ESG focus of corporates, buoyant investor interest, proactive policy support, and enhanced availability of financing avenues. Capacity plans by leading module manufacturers aggregate to nearly 80 gigawatt, which will entail a capex of nearly rupees 12,000 crores over the next 2 to 3 years. However, the resultant capacity growth will make domestic players increasingly dependent on export markets, given the annual module requirement of 40 to 50 gigawatt over the medium term. Domestic cell capacity is expected to witness commensurate growth to reach 60 gigawatt by FY27 on the back of hefty capacity announcements by major players. The players are likely to draw confidence from strong policy support for progressive backward integration for the implementation of the envisaged capex of over rupees 30,000 crores over the next 2 to 3 years. We'll now look at key policies of the Indian government for the solar equipment manufacturing sector. Starting 1st April 22, the government imposed a basic customs duty or BCD of 25% and 40% on Chinese cells and modules, respectively, to help domestic cells and modules compete against the predatory pricing of their Chinese counterparts. The government has also mandated the procurement of domestic modules using domestically produced cells which meet the domestic content requirement criteria, also referred to as DCR modules, for solar capacities under government-funded schemes. Further, the government has mandated procurement of domestic modules only from the ALMM1 list for solar capacity installations in India, with ALMM2 for domestic cells currently under consideration. To promote development of the local solar manufacturing value chain, the government announced production-linked incentives or PLI with a capital allocation of nearly rupees 18,000 crore for about 50 gigawatt across the polysilicon to module stages. Now we'll take a closer look at the key aspects of these schemes. As shown in Exhibits 9 and 10, BCD of 40% on imported modules increases landed cost of modules by nearly 4 to 5 cents per watt peak, while BCD of 25% on imported cells further increases landed cost of modules by 1 to 2 cents per watt peak, as shown in Exhibit 11. However, DCR modules cost nearly 24 to 26 cents per watt peak on a landed basis, as seen in Exhibit 12. In a nutshell, DCR modules are currently pricier than imported modules as well as non-DCR modules on a landed basis, primarily due to the steep fall in global module prices over last 2 years, thereby partly offsetting the impact of BCD. Nonetheless, BCD remains a key tool in increasing the cost competitiveness of domestic modules. The government has mandated procurement of DCR modules for projects being set up under aided schemes listed on the left side. The CPSU scheme for participation of central PSUs in utility scale solar projects has a VGF support outlay of nearly rupees 8,600 crores for setting up 12 gigawatts solar projects, out of which nearly 8 gigawatt capacity has been awarded till H1 FY25. The PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana, announced in February 2024, for promoting rooftop solar installations has a capital subsidy outlay of rupees 75,000 crores, targeting 1 crore households. The scheme envisages nearly 25 gigawatt residential rooftop solar installations over the next 2 to 3 years. In the PM Kusum Yojana, launched in March 2019, a financial support of rupees 34,400 crores has been allocated with a decentralized solar capacity of almost 9 gigawatt to be set up by farmers under Component A. The government initially planned to implement the ALMM by 31st March 2023, but deferred the same to 31st March 2024 due to insufficient local module capacity to serve the domestic requirement. In light of the strong module capacity growth in FY24, the government brought ALMM into effect from 1st April 2024, making domestic modules compulsory for all solar projects in the country, barring utility scale projects awarded before 10th March 2021 and open access and net metering projects that had secured key approvals before 1st October 22. The government has also proposed to implement ALMM 2 for solar cells, making domestic cells mandatory to be used in domestic modules. This change could potentially increase landed cost of modules by 6 to 7 cents per watt peak, leading to rise in solar tariffs by 40 to 50 paise per unit for the short run, although the impact is expected to taper off as growing local cell supply makes DCR modules cost competitive in the long run. As shown in Exhibit 13, module imports surged in the second half of FY24 as the implementation of ALMM drew nearer, resulting in more than 4 times annual growth over FY23. However, module imports moderated in the 5-month FY25 period, having continued only for project categories exempted as per guidelines. Cell imports have seen a gradual increase over FY23 and FY24 and moderated only slightly in the 5-month FY25 period, perhaps owing to enhanced domestic cell supply. Apart from tariff and non-tariff barriers, the government also endeavors to promote domestic manufacturing through the PLI scheme, under which 7.4 gigawatt of cell plus module capacity, 16.8 gigawatt of deeply integrated capacity, and 27.4 gigawatt of fully integrated capacity has been allocated to major players for incentives of nearly rupees 18,000 crore. Although the on-ground progress for these capacities has been slackened by issues such as shortage of capital equipment and skilled labor, the players are likely to proceed with the investments as the issues are gradually ironed out. The upcoming capacity of 50 gigawatt for cells and 80 gigawatt for modules necessitates a capex of rupees 32,000 crore and rupees 12,000 crore respectively. Coupled with the cumulative capex of rupees 55,000 crore envisioned for 40 gigawatt of wafer and nearly 25 gigawatt of polysilicon capacities awarded under PLI, the solar equipment sector will witness a capex of close to rupees 1 lakh crore with an estimated debt funding of nearly rupees 70,000 crore over the next 3 to 5 years. While the sector promises attractive returns with a payback period of 4 to 5 years of cell capacity, assuming normalized 15 to 20% operating margins, as against the exceptionally high margins prevailing due to demand-supply mismatch, and a payback period of 1.5 to 2 years for module capacity, challenges such as rapidly evolving technology, dependence on China for capital equipment, and availability of skilled manpower need to be overcome. We'll now look at India's module exports and how enticing an opportunity they present. When it comes to exports, it's pertinent to talk about USA and its trade policies as it constitutes over 95% of India's module exports. Owing to China's dumping of modules into the US market, the government has imposed countervailing and anti-dumping duties on Chinese modules starting in 2012, followed by retrospective duties on Southeast Asian nations based on anti-trade investigations. However, the major game changer has been the sanctions under the ULFA, which prohibits import of goods with origins from the Xinjiang region of China due to forced labor issues. Detention of modules from China and Southeast Asia due to deep supply chain linkages to the Xinjiang region has curtailed US market access for Chinese players. Trade barriers apart, the US government has also implemented investment incentives through the Inflation Reduction Act introduced in August 22, which provides incentives in the form of either up to 30% capital subsidy or a local production linked subsidy. Since the implementation of IRA, nearly 35 gigawatt module capacity has been added in the US, apart from module capacity of nearly 41 gigawatt and cell capacity of nearly 43 gigawatt in the pipeline. In its latest move to bridge the gap in its domestic solar supply chain, the US government announced 25% capital subsidy under the Section 48D of the CHIPS Act 22 for ingot and wafer capacities that begin construction before 2027. Indian module exports to the US surged with delay in ALMM-linked domestic demand and wider acceptance at higher margins in US market. Indian cell exports to the US saw a stratospheric jump due to high demand for cells of non-Chinese make, while ULFA scrutiny on non-DCR modules and slowdown in solar installations in US moderated India's modules exports momentum in 5-month FY25 period. Indian cell exports remained unfazed. However, strong exports order book and progressive decoupling with China keeps the prospects bright as Indian players can export DCR compliant modules to the US market at margins nearly 2 to 3 times of domestic margins. Having reviewed the demand supply trends, regulatory environment, and export trends for the sector, we'll now look at the price trends. As shown in Exhibit 21, landed cost of imported module prices has plummeted to nearly 18 cents per watt peak as of September 2024 due to a global price crash owing to Chinese supply outstripping demand, nearly offsetting the impact of BCD. Likewise, a similar dip in cell prices has lowered the landed cost of domestic modules. Overcapacity has forced Chinese manufacturers to dump products in export markets at cutthroat prices, further worsened by ULFA sanctions. Although imported modules remain cheaper than domestic modules by 8 to 10%, despite the applicable duties, non-tariff barriers and government-sponsored schemes are likely to spur demand for domestic modules. In the context of prevalent solar tariffs of rupees 2.5 to 2.7 per unit seen so far in FY25, domestic cells are currently being sold at a healthy margin of 4 to 5 cents per watt peak over their production cost, as seen in Exhibit 23, owing to the paucity of domestic cell supply. This is likely to result in a price differential of 6 to 7 cents per watt peak for DCR modules vis-a-vis non-DCR modules. Consequently, as seen in Exhibit 24, CareEdge Ratings envisages that the implementation of ALMM2 for DCR modules could result in pushing solar tariffs back to rupees 3 per unit levels last seen over 2 years ago for the short run. To put CareEdge Ratings sectoral view in a nutshell, the solar equipment manufacturing sector has plenty going for itself, driven by healthy domestic demand prospects, export opportunities ripe for the taking, proactive policy support, and improved lenders' appetite for RE projects. However, lack of integrated solar equipment capacity, supply chain dependence on China, increasing competitive intensity, and delay in RE capacity additions due to systemic issues are some headwinds that remain monitorable over the medium term. Thank you. I'll now hand it back to Mamta.
Thank you, Mayuresh. Attendees are requested to key in their questions, which we will take up after our panel discussion. Now, may I invite Jatin Arya to take over the session, please. Jatin is a director at CareEdge Ratings and specializes in handling the energy sector portfolio. He holds bachelor's degree in business studies from Shahid Sukhdev College of Business Studies, Delhi University, and PGDM from Management Development Institute, Gurgaon. He also holds a master's degree in European business from ESCP Paris. He has industry experience of more than 12 years in the credit ratings domain. Over to you, Jatin.
Thank you, Mamta, for the quick introduction and Mayuresh for the wonderful deck presentation. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to one and all who have joined us for today's webinar on solar equipment manufacturing sector. We have today with us undoubtedly, some of the best minds from the industry to deliberate on this subject and share their valuable perspectives with us. I'd like to, first introduce you to our esteemed panelists in the alphabetical order. So our first panelist is Mr. Chiranjeev Singh Saluja from Premier Energies Limited. He's the MD of Premier Energies Limited, and he's responsible for leading the overall operations of the company. And he has successfully led them in becoming one of the leading cell and module manufacturing companies in India. He has been honored with a professional doctorate in global leadership and management by the European International University, France. He is also a member of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, that is FICCI, and a director of All India Solar Industries Association. So welcome, Mr. Saluja.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Mr. Kuldeep Jain from CleanMax Group. So Kuldeep is the managing director at CleanMax Group. In fact, he incorporated the flagship company of the group way back in 2011. And CleanMax is amongst the leading CNI-focused developers in the country. Previously, he was working in the capacity as a global partner in energy and corporate finance practice at McKinsey & Company. He's a distinguished alumni of IIM Ahmedabad and a chartered accountant. Welcome, Kuldeep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Our third panelist for today's session is Mr. Neeraj Gupta from Renew Group. So Neeraj has an experience of almost 2 decades in the industry in varying roles, some of which include business development, project monitoring, procurement, commercial, regulatory divisions of various corporates. Currently, he's working as a senior vice president, strategy and commercial, and he also leads the solar manufacturing division at Renew. Prior to Renew, he has worked with PwC and Sun Edison. So welcome, Neeraj, to our webinar.
Very much. Thank you.
Yeah. And now let me introduce to you all our fourth and the last panelist. He's the Global Chief Marketing Officer of Waaree Energies Limited, Mr. Nilesh Malani. With a rich industry experience of 27 plus years, Nilesh spearheads the marketing division of Waaree Group and is responsible for marketing, business strategy, sales, brand management, and digital initiatives. He has been crucial in promoting Waaree's range of solar products and solutions, which include panels, EPC services, and storage systems. So welcome, Nilesh.
Hi.
Yeah. Now for a few preliminary remarks on today's theme, and then I'll commence the discussion. The Indian solar equipment manufacturing sector is actually going through an extremely dynamic phase, with players planning capacity addition across the value chain. So this actually necessitates major investments across the value chain. So we are indeed witnessing the governing authorities as well as private participants closely work together to achieve the goal of self-sustainability or Atmanirbharta by building a robust domestic manufacturing ecosystem. Yet, there is a challenge in the form of supply chain disruptions, regulatory uncertainties, dependence on China for technology, equipment, manpower, along with the raw materials, of course. And obviously, there are also those geopolitical relationships with the key economies, including the US, that are the key monitorables. So this brings me to a very pertinent question, that is, will there be sunny days ahead for the equipment manufacturers in the long run? So without further imposing myself, I would like to start posing some key questions to the panel of experts that we have on our webinar today and ask for their opinion on what beckons ahead for the industry. So I'd like to, start the discussion by posing my first question to a module manufacturer. I'll start with, Mr. Saluja right now. So first of all, I primarily, wanted to check your opinion on the overall installed module capacity in India at present. So as per, the presentation that Mayuresh made, we stand at close to 70 plus gigawatt capacity, out of which monoPERC and TOPCon, which are the currently acceptable technologies and constitute more than 50 gigawatt. Given India's module consumption currently is around 20 to 25 gigawatt, and with manufacturers still keen on adding, more module capacities, so does this not pose an oversupply risk in the medium term for the industry?
Yeah, thank you, Jatin. So yeah, you're right that the capacity now is about 70 gigawatt. And as we speak, a lot of it is getting converted to TOPCon technology. Changing a module line from monoPERC to TOPCon is not a big challenge. It is just changing certain jigs and fixtures. Your question on capacity is getting added. Yes, what we see is that in the next 12 to 18 months, we would have at least close to about 150 to 200 gigawatt of manufacturing of solar modules in India. This, as on today, is at 70 gigawatt is not an overcapacity because a lot of the technology also is getting converted to TOPCon. So some of it is redundant and some of it would be upgraded. But if you look at this industry, right, the return on capital employed on a solar module facility is the payback is less than 2 years. So what happens is that the developers want solar modules at the fag end of the COD of the project. They don't buy solar modules and stock them 6 months in advance. So what do the developers look for? They look for players who could churn out 200-300 megawatts every month. So which means that you need to have this kind of capacity, and the capacity you're talking about is 70 gigawatt, subject to the lines running 24/7. This capacity is a theoretical capacity. So what comes out is around 80-85% of what is actually shown on the nameplate rating. A lot of automation is happening, a lot of upgradation is happening. So with 150-200 gigawatt of capacity in India, we could also become a net exporter. If you look at the world markets, as of now, there are only two countries, which is China and now India, which will have large scale solar manufacturing base in the world. So we don't see this as a threat, and we are happy that everybody is investing. This sector is getting all the attention, and the best technology and the best output is coming out in terms of automation in the facilities. Thank you.
Got it. Yeah, so I would also like to move ahead and take this. Ask this. I would like to ask this question to Nilesh as well, because Waaree is amongst the leading manufacturers in India as well. So Nilesh, do you concur with Mr. Saluja's view, and would you like to make some additional points to beyond what he's mentioned?
No, thank you for the question, and I think what Mr. Saluja said very rightly in terms of the capacity addition. I would like to talk about the demand side. Government's agenda by 2030 is to have installed capacity in the overall renewable space to close to 500 gigawatts. Now with this push, and when solar contributing to almost 60-65% of the total renewable energy, we envisage this average installation which is happening close to 20 gigawatt to scale up to 50 to 60 gigawatt in coming years. With the push of green hydrogen also, there might be an additional requirement of solar energy for the green hydrogen business. That will further accelerate the overall installed capacity, additional 100-150 gigawatts in time to come. So with 150 gigawatts of overall estimated production capacity, we still feel that there is enough and more which is required in India for the next at least 6 to 8 years, and we will be the net exporter, because not just US but the other markets in the world are also having a China plus one strategy, and that will definitely benefit the Indian manufacturers.
Got it, Nilesh. So, after the positive, opening remarks from the manufacturers, I would now request Kuldeep to come in here as a developer and, user of these products. So my first question to Kuldeep would be, when government was actually, proposing to make this ALMM mandatory, multiple IPPs had expressed concerns over the quality, efficiency, and long-term effectiveness of domestic modules vis-a-vis the imported ones. So have those concerns actually been alleviated now, because most of the industry has started using these products, or do these concerns still persist in a developer's mind?
I would firstly compliment the Indian module manufacturing industry, given that the government through non-tariff barriers has essentially made it a 100% make in India. I think everyone has massively upgraded both their capacities as well as shifted their lines to TOPCon, right? So that has happened. And yes, there were fears back in, I would say, April 23, that when we make a shift in April 24, will there be enough modules available? Because price is one thing, but what will be the availability and the quality was a big concern. But I think the Indian module manufacturers have done a bang up job of investing in capacity and quality upgradation to TopCon. Of course, a pertinent question remains that at least when you look at a lot of the Chinese folks, they seem to be aiming to move towards HJT by 2027. And China has also banned exports of HJT capital manufacturing equipment, so won't be so easy to do HJT here in India. But we'll see what happens. But as of now, modules are available in enough quantity and quality, and not really affecting project timelines.
Got it. Thanks, Kuldeep, for your opening remarks. I wanted, before coming to Neeraj, I wanted to go back to Mr. Saluja and pose another question. Right now in the latest ALMM list, as we see, there is a foreign manufacturer also, who's got himself listed. Plus, there could be some Chinese also that could be making the list. In case they try to enter through forming various JVs or set up indigenous manufacturing facilities, in India. So I just wanted to check with Mr. Saluja. So do you think this will actually pose a threat to domestic manufacturers? And again, right now they're enjoying a very rosy time in terms of getting, good margins for either be modules or cells. But tomorrow, if there is a, intense competition by these Chinese players, could this actually, lead to some erosion?
So let me be honest, my personal opinion on this is it doesn't seem like a threat. From the industry would love, and would want large Chinese companies with tech know-how to come to India, to partner with Indian companies subject to following the law of the land, subject to government regulatory regulations. There's a lot to learn from the Chinese in where they have reached in terms of scale and technology. We from Premier and I individually support this, and I think that partnership with large experienced companies from China, by partnering or setting shop in India, will only add to the technology race what we are getting into, and we'll be able to offer the right product and the latest technology to the developers. So I think that's a plus and not a negative.
Got it. So moving forward, I also wanted to, India has actually launched this PLI scheme, which Mayuresh's presentation highlighted. So Neeraj, I would like to pose a question to you on PLI. You are also one of the winners, even though your company is a winner in the tranche 2. So I just wanted to check with you regarding an industrial, an industry development. The capacities that were won by various corporates in the PLI tranche 1 auction, they were expected to have become operational by now. Even tranche 2, capacities were expected to, be at a very advanced stage by right now. But what we understand is that there has been very limited progress in terms of getting these capacities live. So what have been the key impediments, and have these issues been resolved right now? What have been the impediments which are actually, slowing down the progress in this field?
So I think we need to first understand the PLI scheme itself. Actually, it encouraged the backward integration, right? It basically gave more incentive from poly to module. And from the beginning of the scheme, I think the scheme was very aggressively designed, like to bring everything from the poly to module in India within 3 years. So I think that was a bit of a more aggressive approach. But what we have been able to do with the PLI is many other things which the PLI has encouraged the people to go into, say, module first. And we have seen a lot of module capacity already driven in India. But that was more driven through ALMM, right? The incentives under the PLI were limited. If you see a total incentive which is available under the PLI scheme, which was around, say, 0.5 to 1 cent maximum, which is spread across 5 years period. In that sense, at that time when the PLI scheme was announced, the Chinese module prices were also around 18 to 20 cents. If the Chinese module price fall back to 9 cents, right, the whole objective of the scheme, which was to commercially make the Indian modules competitive in comparison to China, I think it took some backstep. And therefore, the non-tariff barriers were become the only solution to the Chinese competition in India. Therefore, when we see that which has succeeded in terms of bringing the capacity into the India, that is the non-tariff barriers rather than the tariff barriers. So PLI is kind of the incentive schemes. There were tariff barriers like ADD. Those are not which are actually working in the market. What is actually working in the market is the non-tariff barriers like ALMM. So if I see this market as an equipment manufacturer to grow, uh, the next big thing which India has announced is basically ALMM on cells, right? And therefore, most of the cell manufacturers are now actually taking steps to do a second phase of expansion. Now, if we look into the third next steps, if you look into the government, what has been envisaged by the manufacturer is that they should announce the wafer incentives in the form of the non-tariff barrier, which is again ALMM on wafers, maybe some pipeline which basically says it will be implemented in 2028 instead of 2026, but it will give a next push to the next level of the backward integration. And similarly for the poly. So I will say that the PLI scheme played its role. It was a learning how we have to kind of balance against the China. Earlier, it was thought that the commercial incentives and the tariff barriers will help. But if you move and see the history, how it turned out, the tariff barriers and incentive schemes were kind of a push to a certain extent, maybe 10 to 20%. But 80% of the push came from the non-tariff barriers. And we have a reasons for it, right? The China always, if you see not just the manufacturing in solar, but in ancillaries as well, be it glass or aluminum frame, whenever there has been a tariff push from the government, at the same time, there has been a push to lower the price in China to make them competitive even with those barriers, right? So I will say that all this is a kind of a balancing act. I will not blame PLI. I will say it was a very good scheme when it was actually rolled into the market. But yes, there were countermeasures which were put by the other countries in plane, which made it ineffective for some time. Government learned and moved to the next steps, how this need to be counterbalanced. They moved to a non-tariff barriers in last two supply chains, and probably they will move to a non-tariff barriers in the upper two supply chain, which is wafer and poly later. But this is a step-by-step approach. I will say the jump into poly to module at one time was probably a kind of bit aggressive, but yes, it worked out in time in terms of putting the intention clear to the market as an Indian positioning. Yeah. So impediments, I will say that again, I don't count the commercial incentive as one of the greatest measures to kind of ramp up the capacity in India. So rather, I will say that the things has to be turned 360 degrees, right? The incentives, whenever we go to MNRE, we go to the policymakers, we say that the tariff barriers are not going to work in this sector. So probably you have to give it a push in terms of non-tariff barrier for 2, 3 years. As Saluja also said, after 2, 3 years, we learn from the global players, and then we are competitive in terms of scales and volumes, in terms of ecosystems like ancillaries. And then definitely 10 to 20% of the tariff barrier will start working. But we have to wait till the time. So PLI incentives, I think, are for a kind of boost to manufacturing. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have, one related question. You rightly, I mean, one of the things which comes up in various discussions, about these ancillaries, things like glass, various chemicals, and, all kind of, electrical material, which also goes into the panel, something which is probably less fashionable. You are satisfied with the way the ecosystem for supply of these elements is coming up in the country?
So again, I will just take an example, right? Earlier we saw that who are competitive in India. Earlier glass used to be sold by a couple of players in India. They were competitively placed. Then again, the dumping started on glass. They were a bit of uncompetitive for the last 6 to 8 months. Government again took an action in terms of ADD. Again, provisional ADD has been imposed. So I think they will again become competitive. It's a race. So I think there will be a countermeasures planned by the other countries. But the things are moving out well for the ancillaries as well. The glass capacity has expanded in the last few years. Aluminum frame guys also got an additional boost. So I think they are also getting some capacity additions in India. I think they will flourish. The other things are actually a bit small in value, like junction box. They are not technology product. They are just a commodity product with a cable and some diode into it. So people can expand very rapidly. And I think they don't have any barriers yet, but very small incentives or barriers in those ancillaries market will also work out well for the industry. So I think we have seen a lot of push from the government. It started with the main product like poly. Main product like module. Then they saw that it is working well. Then they gave it a boost to a glass. In terms of BCD, it was not enough. They made a provisional duty, which may be more notified by finance, which will be additional. Similarly, on aluminum frame, there was earlier duty which was less. Then they put out an additional ADD, so that made it competitive. So I think there is a considerable, very, very positive movement. And over 2 to 3 years, I see when the capacity comes up in volume, they will be equally competitive. And then the barriers can go out as well. They will be globally competitive, I think. Once we reach a 50 to 60 gigawatt market, that's where the scale breaks up. And ancillary, we seeing our major ancillaries are coming up in India, which makes up like 60 to 70% of the ancillary cost.
Yeah, got it. So we shall be taking questions from the audience in a short while. Meanwhile, I request the participants to key in their questions in the panel. So while the questions come in, I have a few more questions up my sleeve for our esteemed panelists. I'd like to return to Kuldeep. With the government, Kuldeep, releasing a draft proposal to make it mandatory for all the domestic projects to procure domestically manufactured cells from 2026 onwards, what would be the possible impact on determined tariffs, as domestically manufactured cells are currently dearer than the Chinese counterparts? And you have a very wide array of customers, and the top, all the top corporates in the world, or perhaps in India, are your customers. Do you see any resistance by your off-takers towards bearing this additional cost?
So firstly, look, the entire industry, whether it is manufacturers or developers or consumers of green electricity, have to eventually comply with the operational government law. So if the government says we will ban import of Chinese-made solar cells, only work with Indian-made solar cells, then one has to comply with that. It's almost fait accompli at one level. Of course, there will be some cost implications, just like even when we have moved from Chinese-made modules to Chinese-made cells plus Indian-made modules. The BOS cost comes out higher by about 3 cents or 4 cents for Indian players. As some of our friends from the manufacturing side explained, due to maybe lack of scale, just generally higher supply chain costs in India and so on. There's a certain delta in cost that is attached. And a similar delta will happen when we move to Indian-made cells as well. And one will have to bear the delta in cost. But unlike, the thing which we should be conscious of as a nation is that unlike manufacturing modules, manufacturing cells is multiple times more capital intensive per megawatt, and therefore takes longer to put up, right? And the same, what no one really has a perfect answer to, but our only concern more than price would just be availability. We should not be in a situation of slowing down our country's march towards energy independence, right? And green transition in that way. And, the timing, therefore, has to work out appropriately such that there is more than enough domestic capacity. Because if we ban imports without adequate domestic cell capacity, because the domestic cell capacity is also being used to export to the US, is also being used to sell into the subsidized government household solar scheme, and will also come to manufacturers. So there are many claimants on that capacity, and it's far more expensive and time consuming to put up. So, it's more about, look, is it available? Because if the contrary happens, that not enough capacity is available, then prices will also shoot up because you'll have a demand supply mismatch. Then and availability is not there, then whatever green transition plans corporates had or companies had of putting up those projects cannot happen. So that is, of course, it's to be seen. It is meant to be in 2026, so it's still sort of almost 2 years away. But we have to work towards it from now. But the precise timing may have to be fine-tuned based on availability of capacity.
So perhaps, Kuldeep, if we have to put a number, right now we are perhaps at 7 gigawatt cell capacity. Maybe we would be needing somewhere close to 50, 60 gigawatt installed capacity, because we may have close to a 30, 40 gigawatt demand by the end of 2026. Yeah.
And the cell capacity is also needed for US exports.
Correct. True.
Right. Cell capacity is also, our domestic rooftop scheme says, cells must be made in India. So the requirements for domestic cells are many.
Would Nilesh or Chiranjeev perhaps would you like to comment on this? What kind of a capacity should be there before we make it mandatory for all projects?
Yeah, Jatin, so I completely align with what Kuldeep ji is saying. What is paramount for us as a country is that there should not be any delay in deployment of solar capacity in India. My take would be that, and MNRE did this in the past. If you look at the ALMM for modules, MNRE was monitoring capacity which was getting added in ALMM, and they implemented ALMM only when we crossed 50, 60 gigawatt of module manufacturing in India on the ALMM. I think likewise, as what Kuldeep ji said, I think we should achieve at least 50 to 70 gigawatt of cell manufacturing. So my forecast would be that April 26 is not the right time. I would say April 27 by then, because it's not easy to set up cell lines. Cell line is a process-driven industry. We have seen that it's not easy to set up cell lines and stabilize them. Generally, it takes about 2 to 2.5 years to construct the lines and stabilize them. But at the same time, it's a great move from MNRE to announce a future dated statement for ALMMC, and they should also do this for ALMMW, which is for wafers, so that the industry starts investing. But at the same time, I totally align with what Kuldeep ji said, is we need to have adequate capacity before we actually implement this. Under no way should we compromise deployment of solar in the country.
Got it. So maybe Nilesh, I'll pose the next question to you. You are a key exporter from from India to US, perhaps the largest exporter. So Indian cell and module exports to US have actually become lucrative only in the last couple of years. So there is a lot of capacity also which is coming in US under the Inflation Protection Act. Obviously, both you as well as Chiranjeev's company are also setting up some capacities there. So do you think that once these capacities come up, at least the exports from India are expected to moderate to a very large extent, and perhaps we may have to look at new opportunities thereafter?
I think the export potential of Indian solar cells and modules to the US market will remain promising. While there might be an increase in capacity locally out there, and we will keep on expanding capacities in US itself, but the export market will remain promising to US. The basic reason is that it is the cheapest mode of power. So till the time the solar business will continue to grow in the US, irrespective of which government it is. So we feel that it is just the beginning where the exports have started picking up, and it will continue to boom. And apart from US, there are other markets who are in talks with the Indian companies to get the cells and panels from India. So we feel the export demand will keep on, the momentum will continue, and it will go beyond US as well.
And would you like to name any countries which could be the future US for the Indian manufacturers? I mean, the future export heavens, perhaps.
I think the entire globe is there. The Middle East region is there. Europe is there. The African continent is there. So I think the entire globe is there. It's up to us how much we can expand and how much we can sell.
Got it. So before turning to the questions from the audience, my last question, perhaps to both Neeraj as well as Mr. Saluja. Maybe Neeraj, you can answer this first. So while the government has already provided policy level support through multiple modes, are there any major impediments thwarting the growth of this sector? Any particular items in your wish list, that should be added that the government should actually focus on?
Yeah, I think to keep it simple, I think we should focus on only 3 or 4 factors. Most of the players who want to wish to actually expand in say wafer or the cell capacity, there is a lot of water requirement, there is a lot of electricity requirement, and also the cheap electricity requirement is one of the key factors. And plus, these factories also have a lot of discharge rates. So common CETP is one of the common things which is there in China. So they treat the water up to some level and then they discharge it to the common CETP. And therefore, if you see their plants, their industrial zone, their design of the clustering, how they do for different kind of industry, it's very well planned and thought through. And most of the industry come in cluster wise approach in which you can say 30, 40, 50 gigawatt at one place. Like Inner Mongolia, most of the wafer ingot manufacturing is there. India also should have some kind of approach where they have thought through that where the industry should be placed with these common, very, very common things which they require. They are not very large in numbers, but everyone struggles to just locate their factory where, right? Everyone goes to a very, very different location. We are in Dhulera. Dani obviously is in their location, which is Mundra. Then there are Waaree exploring Odisha also. They are in close to Mumbai, and so all the people are just scattered across all over the place where they think it is the right. They have got the right mix of incentives, right mix of common infra. But it is very easy for the government to actually create a zone which has common infra in place at one location, make it very, very easy. Then the ecosystems can also develop within that zone. So for example, if all the cell manufacturing is at one place, then gases and slurry can just co-locate and then they can serve you. Otherwise, chemical are coming from 500 kilometers for someone it is coming for 1,000 kilometers, different logistics, supply chains, just crisscrossing across India, right? So I think it's not a very big challenge for government. Ideally, I will say just one step back. They have to take one step back in terms of just supporting them in terms of a common infra at one common location with the very, very basics. And then industry can just cut I think the implementation by around a year. If we say 2.5 to 3 years, the general time frame from a zero date to stabilization, I think that can be cut to 18 months to 2 years. So you can easily cut 1.5 year by cutting all these challenges, providing all things at one place.
Got it. Got it. Chiranjeev, if you would like to add something on it, any wish list items?
No, I think the government is doing a great job. I'll be happy if they continue to do this. I mean, I see a lot of positivity in the government towards manufacturing. And I think whatever Neeraj said in terms of cost of electricity for cell manufacturing, you require a lot of water, CTP, all these are the similar things which are required. But government is very proactive. They are listening to us and they are solving problems. So I think they're doing a great job.
Got it. Got it. So I think with this, we come to an end of today's panel discussion, and now we'll take a couple of questions from the audience. So I have a question queue with me. So one question that's very common. I mean, it's come from a few members of the audience. So what they're saying is that with the Trump administration coming into power, and they are somewhat anti-renewables. So has there been any difference in terms of the demand coming from US post his appointment? Maybe Nilesh, if you could attempt that.
Too early to say that. It's been just a week's time. So, but we foresee that the overall demand scenario will continue to remain, constant where it was. As I mentioned earlier, the cost of electricity, the power is the cheapest. The solar power is the cheapest. So while the manufacturing, they will go for made in America. We have a plant in America. We are opening it very soon. But the export demand will not get curtailed. It will continue. Probably there could be curbs on other countries, but India will remain a favorable country for US.
Got it. Got it. Anything that Chiranjeev, perhaps you want to add to it because you're also a major exporter to US? Any things that, yeah.
Yeah, so for us, our exposure to US is very limited. Not more than 3% of our revenue is export to the US. We in fact limit our supplies of solar cells to the US because for us the domestic demand is what we focus on. We do have a presence in US, but the quantum of sales which we do to US is about 3% of our annual revenues.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I will just add one point here. In the long run, I see that US being very expensive in manpower, right? So incentives can help to only certain extent. The current approach of US government on IRA, I think it's a kind of a midterm boost, maybe 2 to 3 years. It can go up to 2030 and then it tapers down as well. Right. So it does not look like, to me, a very long-term and sustained solution, what they have actually put together for putting up a manufacturing and then sustaining it in the US market. On the other hand, what I see as an Indian market is that the currently China is underpassing by volume and a lot of subsidies, which again is not a very sustained approach. So they can kind of push the market in other countries out if you don't provide a right policy support, which India is doing a great job providing a right policy support to sustain for 2 3 years. And once that period is over with the sustained and good bulk volume of around 60 to 80 gigawatt in India, I think Indian market will be the one which will actually conquer the world, I think. Because on a sustained level, how the India is working is on a sustained basis, not pushing like China in terms of pushing the other market out by unrealistic subsidies, which they cannot support for over a very sustained period of time. That will go out in some time. Similarly, I think pushing over aggressively on incentives just to sustain the industry will come up, they will die if they are not having any sustainable plan, how they are going to survive in 3 to 5 years. So I think India in that sense is rightly placed with the right cost of manpower, availability of manpower. The ecosystem just has to go up to 60 to 80 gigawatt, which we always hear from MNRE that they are looking at somewhere around 60 gigawatt as a benchmark in all the supply chains. Once that comes up, ancillary will automatically grow and mushroom around it. And I think at that time, I don't think is there anyone, just technology, we have to just keep some pace. As Kuldeep was also saying at JT or maybe HPBC or etc. These are the new technologies which we have to kind of catch up to keep our sustained growth. So in terms of commercials, I think by deploying a technology, we can also sustain for some time. Our challenge is going to be a technology adoptions and accelerating and then deploying them and then keep them running. Because those kind of a barrier can be impediment for the future growth, the next phase of growth. So first phase of growth will come, but sustained growth, you need some technology roadmap.
Got it. Got it. So there's a very interesting question, and perhaps, both Kuldeep and Chiranjeev are the right people to answer it. It, pertains to the segment in which they operate. So I'm breaking the question into two parts. So as CleanMax is one of the largest developer of even rooftop solar in India, and perhaps they started this thing. What they say is that right now there is, this big subsidy which is promised by the government, and it's on developing, rooftop solar again. An item which has actually not done so well. Previously, also we had kept a target of 40 gigawatt of rooftop solar by 2022, and we fell terribly. Current rooftop installations would be, I mean, in my opinion, it would be closer to 9-10 gigawatt. Kuldeep would know it better than me, I'm pretty sure. So right now, with a staunch target that the government has given that we'll do close to 30-35 gigawatt to, fully utilize the 75,000 crore subsidy. So what is the thing which is actually, impeding us in going, full throttle in terms of installations in the rooftop market? What are the challenges? What are the challenges that perhaps you have faced in this segment?
Chiranjeev, you want to take that?
Yes, I can take that. So Jatin, I think whatever challenges we had are things of the past. Government has, kind of eased the whole process. We work with integrators who buy solar panels from us. We are talking to integrators who are quite happy with the new system where there is a portal and a very minimum kind of a documentation, and the beneficiary is getting the subsidy directly into the beneficiary's account. You don't need to run around different state government departments to get this subsidy or to get approvals. I'm quite positive about this, I would say rooftop scheme 2.0, which is now running, and we are seeing that the demand is quite high. There was also a concern that, why should somebody spend, subsidy money on DCR modules? We even shared details with ministry saying that today DCR modules are about 6 rupees per watt more expensive compared to non-DCR modules. And this is because China is bleeding and their non-DCR prices are at all-time low. Otherwise, this gap would have been lower. But even with today's gap of about 5 to 6 rupees on a 3 kilowatt system, what the government is spending is only about 15 to 18,000 rupees to promote DCR out of the 78,000 rupees of subsidy, which means all the subsidy is not going to promote DCR modules, which was a kind of a misunderstanding. So I think things are the government has a very clear protocol now. They are having a DCR verification portal. Things are moving. I feel that this is going to be a great development if this 30-40 gigawatt gets deployed as per target. This is also going to ease the load on the grid, and as it's going to be one of the largest rooftop program ever conducted. So I'm quite positive about this.
Got it. Got it. So I think, and one more thing. I mean, the related question was even for the CPSU scheme. I mean, CPSU scheme started a long back, but the traction in terms of installations in that scheme have also lagged. So what would be the key reasons over there why we are not going, full throttle over there as well?
So there again, the same issue, Jatin, is that we did not have enough capacities, right? Today, the capacity in India for DCR is 7.6 gigawatt, which is on the MNRE portal. Of course, another 3.5, 4 gigawatt of Tatas, which has come up, has not been added, which means we are close to about 10 gigawatt. With Renew coming in, it would be about 12 and a half. MV coming in, that's another 1.5. Waaree is coming in with a 5.4. I'm seeing rapid expansion on the cell production also. And I would say that CPSU deployment was an issue in the past because of lack of availability of DCR cells. Now this is moving quite positive. Projects are getting deployed, and I don't see any challenge now going forward.
Got it. Got it. So I think with this, we would like to, end today's panel discussion. And, thanks a lot, to all the esteemed guest speakers for their insightful views and, patiently answering all the audience questions that were posed. This is actually a very exciting topic, but due to paucity of time, we are unable to take up all the questions. So it was a great privilege to host you, Mr. Saluja, Mr. Kuldeep, Mr. Nilesh, and Mr. Neeraj. And thank you to all the participants for taking time out from their busy schedules and being a part of this CareEdge Ratings webinar. I shall now hand over to my colleague Mamta for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Jatin, for moderating the session, and Mayuresh for your presentation. Once again, thanking all our guest speakers for their insightful views. It was a privilege to host you. And lastly, thank you to all the participants for taking the time out and being a part of this CareEdge webinar. For further queries, feedback, or suggestions, please write to us in the feedback mail. Goodbye for now. Request the tech team to kindly log off.